I was nervously getting off the bus, surrounded by people who all seemed far more comfortable than me to actually be there. I was going to the first basketball camp that I'd ever been to away from my parents, and it was one of those where you stay a week overnight, and I had to take an 8-hour bus ride to get there, and I had not spoken a single word on my way there. Reason number one being because I was too nervous to actually go and speak to anyone, and no one had actually come up to speak to me, so I was extremely nervous because I thought I was going to be alone this whole week. As I was getting off the bus to grab my bag that was literally as big as I was greeted by an extremely nice and outgoing guy who would become my coach for the next week. He told me that I had quite the load, and it was impressive that I could carry all that. Asked what my name was, where I was from, gave me a fist bump, and told me if I needed anything that just to tell him and he'd take care of it. Now, that was the first time I'd spoken since I got on that bus and gotten off in this whole 8-hour ride, so I felt extremely welcomed by this guy who was so outgoing. And the thing was, he didn't only do this for me, he went around to every single person that he would be coaching for the next week, and right when they got there and introduced themselves, asked what their name was. Now, I didn't meet one person during my whole week at that camp who didn't say they liked that coach, and he was everyone's favorite coach. Now, as I was kind of getting settled in to this camp, and I was starting to talk to a few people, coming out of my shell a little bit, and we were soon to have our first training session. And after the first training session, you kind of get a pretty good idea of like who's really good, who's nice to be around, whose team you want to be on, and who you kind of want to avoid. And after that first session, it was dead clear who I wanted to avoid. There was this one kid who I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but trust me when I tell you, no one wanted to be around him. I'm not even sure why he was there, because he did not know how to play basketball, but he assumed he was the cream of the crop. He thought he was the best player in there, but he did not know how to dribble. He didn't even know the rules. He didn't even know what traveling was. So I'm not 100% sure why he was even allowed to be in the camp, but no one wanted to be around this guy. He thought he was so good, and he would tell everyone else that he was the best player there. He'd tell you you were trash. If you made a mistake, he'd get so pissed at you for no reason, even though he's like literally traveling around with the ball, does not know anything about basketball. But if you missed a shot, he'd get extremely mad at you. In the dorms, he was even worse. When everyone was trying to go to sleep, he'd have this DS. I don't know if any of you remember what a DS is, but it was like 2018, and he'd bring his DS and he'd play it on full volume. And they're not that loud, but everyone is trying to sleep after a hard day of playing basketball. But since he didn't really put any effort into any of the drills, he's just sitting there playing like Sonic on his DS and being so annoying. He'd also steal other people's food that they had. Like, I had this box of Cliff Bars, and I was in the bathroom one time, and I came out to see him just taking a handful of Cliff Bars, and I told him, like, bro, you don't have to steal my food, just like next time just ask and I'll give you one. But I'm obviously not going to give you one now because you're literally just trying to take them. And he tried to steal food from literally everyone that had some, but he wouldn't ask. On top of that, this kid would fart so much. One of the friends that I made was below him in the bottom bunk, and when we'd sit around, we'd kind of all go to the bunks, and no one would want to talk to that kid. He'd just be sitting on top. We'd just be in the middle of the conversation, and he'd be like, guys, guess what? And we'd all look up at him and be like, what? And he'd just let one rip as loud as he could. No one except him actually found that funny, and they stank so bad. Also with this kid, he would lie about every single thing. So obviously in this video, I can assume which person you want to be like. So I'm going to teach you to be more like my coach and less like my annoying dorm mate. Firstly, you need to stop thinking about yourself so much. We are all self-centered creatures, and that is extremely normal, but we are all always so selfish. We want people to be our friends for our benefit. We think everyone is thinking about our insecurities when they're actually only thinking about themselves, and we always want to do stuff for our gain. We want to make this amount of money by doing this so we have that money, not by helping other people. We want to get the physique so other people give us validation. And it's such a common aspect of self-improvement. Once you start to get into it, you just want to do it for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with being self-centered by nature, but if we want to actually become better friends with people, then we have to take an interest to them. We all know people who simply just seem to talk about themselves nonstop, and it's so off-putting in conversation when you feel like you cannot enter the conversation because the other person is just going on and on and on about whatever they love to do, but they're never asking about you. And it takes the two-sided dynamic out of a conversation. It's just one-sided, and that's no way to have a relationship. A relationship is a two-way street. So if you want to actually form a friendship, don't be the person who's always talking about themselves. That kid that I was describing thought he was the best basketball player on the planet. No, obviously he's much more on the extreme side of things because he'd obviously put other people down besides bringing himself up. But we want to make sure that we're actually bringing other people up and making sure they actually feel like we're interested in them. If we can become the person who's interested in other people, much like my coach was, he was asking everyone where they're from, how old they are, what position they play in basketball, or all these other things. He's genuinely taking an interest to them. He's not telling you about his history in basketball. He's not telling you how many teams he's coached and da-da-da-da. He's taking an interest into you, and that can't help but make you feel welcome to be there. We don't necessarily have to be talking all the time for people to actually like us. If we can get them to talk about things that they like, then they're genuinely gonna like us more because we're taking an interest to them, and they feel like they can share a part of their lives with us, which just makes them feel good. Number 2 is be able to break the touch barrier. Now, I know that sounds weird, but it's extremely important to be able to establish physical contact with someone, to be able to have a level of intimacy right when we meet them. My coach, for example, would always come up and shake your hand or give you a fist bump, give you a high five if you made a good play, and that makes you feel extremely good. It shows that you can have a level of trust in this person, and they have nothing to hide. They're not out to get you. They genuinely want the best for you, and establishing that physical contact, especially early when you first meet someone, is extremely important. You want to be someone who's open and likable, and you don't want to be like the kid who's that I described, who if you actually, like, he went to fist bump, you're nervous that he's gonna spin around and like fart on you or something. But you just want to be able to actually, you don't have to do anything weird, just like do it naturally. You don't have to always force it, like go in for a hug when you just meet someone. Just do what comes naturally to you. For me, when I'm playing sports, high fives are a big one, but when I first meet someone or I'm in the gym or something, fist bumps are good. If it's more of an official introduction, I'll normally shake their hand. You don't have to go crazy with this. Don't overcomplicate it. Just keep it in mind when you're meeting new people. The third point is to remember names. Now, my coach did this extremely well. I never saw him actually mess up someone's name. Like, oh, what's your name again? No, he knew every single person's name. And we always know people who just seem to like know everyone, but that's because they remember their names and they're initiating the interaction. It gives people a sense of importance when you use their name, especially in a conversation. So make sure you do your best to remember it. A lot of people will say like, oh, well, I'm just bad at remembering names and it's all natural, but you are coping. I have one of my friends who says, yeah, I just can't remember names. I'm just bad at it. But that's also the friend who zones out in every single conversation. And he always seems to be like AFK, like in a video game when you're not actually at your keyboard playing or out doing something else. It seems like in his mind, he's always doing something else and he's not actually paying attention to the people that are talking to him. The single biggest way is just make the effort to remember their name. If you don't hear it clearly, ask them to repeat it. It's okay. They're not gonna be offended if you get it wrong the first time, especially if it's like a harder name. Just take some time and actually get it. Once you set the intention in your mind, it's just naturally gonna become easier. And you're never gonna be perfect with this. Trust me, it's gonna take time, but once you start to do it, you're naturally just gonna get better at it. Number 4 is becoming a great listener. Now, it's so easy in our modern day to get caught up in simply not actually paying attention to when someone's talking to you and not being present, because we're always on social media, we're always watching Netflix, playing video games, doing these things that are making our minds so hyperstimulated, and our attention is always jumping from one thing to the next, and we're always so busy in our modern day. So being able to actually focus and concentrate and really listen to someone when they're actually speaking about something they're passionate about is a dying skill. For someone to find you interesting, you don't actually have to be talking to them. You just need to get them to talk about things that they're passionate about. We all love to talk about our accomplishments, and it's so easy to actually just start spewing things that we are doing in our lives and things that we like, but it's so much more beneficial to the relationship if we can get it out to other people. If you have the ability to get someone to talk about something that they're passionate about, and you can just sit back and listen to them talk about something that they're passionate about, then they're gonna notice that and they're gonna value being in your presence. You're not simply gonna be focused on what you're gonna say next in the conversation. There's a big difference between hearing and listening, and often in the conversation we're just hearing what the other person is saying and we're just focused on what we're gonna say next. We don't actually take the time to actually kind of let it process in our brain, and that comes from not being present. So it takes some time to actually get this skill down, but I've found that since I'm naturally quieter, I'm fine with not always speaking in a conversation. I can just sit back and listen. The people who give the best advice often don't really say too much. Sometimes they can just sit there and listen, and while the other person will actually just talk themselves through their situation, and they'll come to the realization without actually needing the help from the other person. But since the other person isn't projecting their opinions and beliefs onto the other person all the time, it allows them to have some time to actually process what they're going through. So you don't necessarily always need to be talking to become a more likable person. The final point that I'm going to make is become the initiator. Stop waiting for things to happen in your life. If you, no matter what you want, if you want to become an athlete, you want to go down this career path, take action to it. Actually pursue it with 100%, everything you got. Be authentic and pursue it with your mind, body, your soul, your heart, your emotions. Just put yourself into it. It's the same as social interactions. It's so rare to meet those outgoing people who just everyone likes to be around. And yes, you can meet someone like that, like my coach, for example. You're gonna meet them in situations, but it's very hard to be befriended by that person because they have so much going on in their life and they're so busy with all their other relationships. It's so much more beneficial if you just take the time and make the effort to become that person yourself. And yes, it's hard. You have to go through a lot of trial and error to get good and kind of grasp the social concepts and get your social intelligence right and get your confidence up, and it takes some time. But once you actually go through that journey, then you can make friends with anyone that you actually want to, and it's a beautiful experience. I'm not quite at the top where I want to be yet, but I'm definitely made a lot of progress from being that little kid who wouldn't speak on an 8-hour bus ride to being where I am now. And if you have resonated with this final point and you want to become the initiator, not just in social interactions, but in the rest of your life, then I've created an online community full of like-minded people who want to improve their lives and want to get better at social interactions, find their true reason for being here, and improve every single aspect of your life. So if you want to become that initiator and start taking action towards your future and just build a beautiful life for yourself, then you can click the top link in the description. I don't have too much left to say in this video. It's really up to you to take action for your future and discover the aspects of yourself that you're holding back. And I know it can be hard, especially if you've struggled with your confidence and limiting beliefs in the past, to start to put yourself out there in social situations. But trust me when I tell you, there are practical steps that you can take to get there. And it's only a matter of time. If you have the right mindset towards it, you're gonna get whatever you want to get. So just take action and keep going.